What up, my people? Welcome to a new thing I'm doing. Instead of the podcast, this is a new thing I'm doing. It's called Letters, and it will be things I've found on the internet about people who attended SRS. And even though it's really hard to find anything because most things are shut down, or Sorensons Ranch tends to sue things, like you guys heard about them suing MySpace back in 2007, and like I've said before, how it's really hard to find anything negative about this place. So that's why I feel also why I'm doing this podcast is to kind of shed some light. And if no one else is going to do it, I think I'm more than happy to do it. So this is a brand new segment, or whatever you want to call it, and I call it Letters, where I will be finding things through the web. And I found a website called heal-online.org with a bunch of statements from, as they like to call it on the website, survivors. So I am going to read you this one today, and it's from a guy named Lucas Larson. And the first thing it says is, everything in this statement is true. I give Heal, which is the website I just told you about, permission to use my statement. So I assume, since it's out there on the internet, on the Heal website, and he gives permission for them to use it, that it would be okay for me to read this on my podcast. Even though I haven't reached out to Lucas or anything, I feel what he wrote was very spot on, and it really made me feel like it was a good, well-written statement of his experiences at Sorensons Ranch School. And to be honest, this is one I read a few months ago that kind of brought tears to my eyes. I remember reading it to my girlfriend when we were on our way back from a little trip we took, a little road trip. And I was kind of starting to ponder the idea of doing the podcast. And this might have been one of the things that helped spark my interest, because after reading it, I thought maybe I recognized this kid going there with him, and as well as how it really hit things to home. So, welcome to Letters. This is the first episode, and let's get into it. Here we go. All right. My name is Lucas Larson. I am 26 now, and 10 years ago I spent 10 months at Sorensons. I have never been able to talk about my experiences at this place without breaking into tears, and writing this down now is no exception. I just got out of a therapy session today where my therapist and I decided to Google Sorensons, and I found this website. I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one who is brave enough to speak out about what this place does. I was a very troubled child. I came from an abusive family with drug-addicted parents. I had an undiagnosed behavioral disorder that prevented me from doing well in school. And that issue alone led to abusive discipline from my parents. I was stripped of everything my parents could take from me. And so I finally ran away from home. I was tracked down by bounty hunters and taken to Sorensons. I was into punk rock and looked the role. I was stripped of my clothes. I was given some clothes that were far too small, with shoes that were about 3 sizes too big. I was not allowed to speak to my parents for 3 weeks after my arrival, at which they informed me that I would be there until I was 18. At 15 years old, this is an eternity. I escaped in the middle of the night shortly following that phone call, and spent about 24 hours in sub-freezing weather trying to make it through the mountains. The attempt was futile, as I was tracked down by some of the staff and was introduced to the behavior modification practices firsthand. I was strip searched for one of many times while I was there, and forced to wear an orange jumpsuit and sit in isolation for 1 week. I was in a room and was not allowed to lay down, talk, read, or do anything but stare at the wall. During this time, I was not allowed to bathe and was not fed on the regular routine that others were kept on. I was hungry, dirty, very cold, and I was planning my suicide at 15 years old. I got out of isolation, which they do call isolation in there, but I noticed that they tell their parents it is behavior modification timeout. Oh, it's complete bullshit. And I have yet to tell any professional about this that does not consider it criminal child abuse. Needless to say, I never killed myself, but that was only in fear that I would get caught. Another kid in there was found after drinking a bottle of toxic surface cleaner and after was transferred to an even stricter and abusive place where he wouldn't be able to try that again. This place makes many claims of its treatment success, but I never saw any of it. There were a great number of very troubled children, but in this environment, treatment was not the right word. Children were beaten for just talking back, but it was not called beating. They called it restraining. But restraining from what? These children who presented no threat to themselves or anyone else had their faces forced onto the pavement or dirt and had their arms bent back around until they screamed begging them to stop. They used this method to prevent leaving any marks that can be used as proof of their actions. It didn't always work though. Many children still ended up with black eyes and scrapes and bruises, with torn muscles and ligament strains. But that didn't matter because no one was allowed to report to anyone what was happening. I sent many letters describing what was happening, but only to find out after my release that they were not even sent. I personally suffered the least of most of these children because I was so weak. I personally suffered the least of these children because I was so weak and scared that I never opposed anyone. I just never opposed anyone in that place. I was, however, beaten by several of the other kids there on a regular basis, the old kick the dog expression, where a kid gets beat up and his bigger, stronger father and only has the dog to retaliate against. Well, I was the dog. I would walk into my room, which were not much more than slums, and would have a blanket thrown over my head and was beaten by fists, feet, and frequently a broomstick. They called this a blanket party. Sorry. And this was done in this way so you couldn't identify any of the attackers. Despite reporting any of these incidents, no precautions were ever made to protect any of the weaker children. I believe that they thought this was just an extra encouragement for us to behave and get out of there. During the 10 months, I spent about 3 or 4 hours a day, but sometimes 8 or 9 doing hard manual labor. This included Saturdays and sometimes Sunday. They would send us around the surrounding farms to haul hay for other people, which they definitely were paid for. This is a crime. There are child labor laws for a reason. School was optional if we had time, but was certainly not encouraged. The place is run by fundamentalist Mormons who don't place education as a high priority. We were run through workouts that would drop most adults before completion. If we couldn't finish it or refused, then we were put into isolation. I trained myself outside of the general workout so I could successfully complete it and avoid more isolation. I made it out with only 2 weeks under my belt. But There was a kid who spent 40 consecutive days in there. I got out before I was 18 by lying and manipulating everyone around me, but it wasn't easy. They know when you are placating. If they even sense that, they will enforce discipline for your dishonesty. I gradually changed the tone of my letters I was sending people, telling them how good I was doing. Once I got out, though, the facade came down. I couldn't hold in all the pain and anger I had for my parents and what they did. To this day, I am still somewhat of an outcast from my family, and I credit this place for that alienation. The mindset you enter to manipulate people never goes away. I still have fear of telling anyone in my life how I feel or what is going on, fearing that they will find a way to use it against me. With therapy, I am learning to let my guard down, but I will always carry the pain inflicted there. It doesn't surprise me that there are so few people speaking of the abuse that took place because they didn't consider it abuse, but because they were so afraid. We were told we were lying the whole time we were in there, and they convinced our parents that this is just part of the process of behavioral modification and that we are just acting out. It's been 10 years and I'm still feeling the pain of abandonment and abuse. When I was there, I had never done drugs and I was so proud of it. When I go out, I begin a spiral of severe addiction and suicide attempts and destructive behavior that I never would have if I were not from the trauma inflicted upon me by the redneck, Bible wielding child abusers at that place. I hope that this gets through to at least one person who chooses to find a better solution and spare their child the nightmares and years of therapy. I have nothing to gain from this except acceptance that I've done something to help. I'm not promoting or competing treatment or promoting any competing treatment facility. I'm just telling my story. In case you are wondering, I am living a healthy life now. I'm drug and alcohol free for 4 years, and I'm getting a degree. None of my current success in life would be attributed to the abuse I suffered, but from loving and trusting people who encourage my growth and healing. Anyone who wishes may contact me, and I would be happy to talk to them. This includes any other survivors, parents who are thinking of sending their kids to this place. If you would like to submit your statement at a Sorensons contest, blah, blah, blah. Wow, yeah. So I just thought that was just very well written and very, very much what I wouldn't be able to put in such words. And boy, oh, that one really hits me hard. And I've read it probably more than 3 or 4 times now in the last few months. And yeah, it's tough. Oh, I want to apologize for my shitty reading, my fucked up back, because that's not easy. But yeah, I'm really excited to be able to share some of these statements with you. And if anybody ever wants to contact me and write a letter, I'd be more than happy to read it out for you. You can stay anonymous and whatnot. And I'd love to hear your input. And yeah, I'll be continuing to do the letters as long as I'm doing the podcast. There's not much you can find online, but the deeper you dive, the more little stories you'll find by past survivors. Now that one, I can't remember if it said the date on it, but a lot of these were pretty old. Like I think that could have been 2005, 2010, maybe, I'm guessing, or later. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate the support. And this is just episode number 1 of the letters. And I'm looking forward to doing a lot more. I don't really know what else to say, so I'll leave you with that. I hope that can at least get to one person or anybody would be awesome. If anyone ever wants to contact me, just leave a comment on the bottom. Let me know what's up. Send you my email address. You can contact me and we can chat. And what else? What else is there? Yeah, that's pretty much it that I can think of. I'll see you guys on Thursday for a new episode of the podcast. And thanks for listening. All right.